I'd love to talk with your organization about a project I'm working on to see if you'd be interested in being involved. And within a week, I had the CEO, CFO, and one of their marketing people in my living room, and I was giving them an hour-long presentation. We'll talk about how that went.
This is Truly Independent, a show that demystifies the indie film journey by documenting the process of releasing independent films in theaters. Each week, Garrett, Batty, and I, Darren Smith, will update you on our journey, bringing guests to share their insights into the process and answer your questions. Garrett, hey man, we're back.
Good to see you again this week, Darren. I'm so excited for this episode.
Oh, me too, because today we're diving into, this is our pitch episode. This is probably what I get questions on more than anything else. How do you pitch? Where do you find people? All this kind of stuff. So for today's episode, get excited, everybody. We're going to talk about 3 types of pitches, scenarios that you might find yourself in as a filmmaker, and how we approach each one of those. So the 3 different scenarios are, 1 is a cold call or cold outreach. Like we do that a lot as filmmakers. We're finding people, we're messaging them, we're telling them about our projects. Second one is where you're given an opportunity, like an introduction to somebody. Someone says, hey, do you know Darren? He's working on cool stuff. So an introduction, what do you do in that scenario? And third is an invited pitch. Like someone has invited you to come and pitch them. So we kind of go from the coldest version to the warmest version. Oh, I'm excited, man. We're finally going to have a piece of content to point people to whenever they ask us about pitching.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I think as I thought about this episode, I realized how much of filmmaking, how much of the work that I do is pitching, because there's a lot of pitching and that goes on kind of unconsciously even, or subconsciously, probably more subconscious than unconscious. But anytime somebody's asking, hey, what's your next project? Or what are you working on? Like that's an opportunity not to be salesy or not to just like always be like that guy that nobody wants to talk to, but you're always kind of pitching whatever you're working on, whether it's in development or in production or in post. You're always selling your next project. Pitching is just the first part of that.
Yeah, 100%. Like pitching should be your middle name as a filmmaker. Whether you're a producer and you're pitching like to raise money for projects, whether you're a director pitching for the same reasons, but you may even need to pitch ideas to actors on set that need to be framed in a pitch. And the better you get at pitching, the more successful you become, I think. So why don't we dive into the first one and talk about cold calling, cold outreach. Like this is where a cold versus hot, meaning you don't know this person, they don't know you. So if you are a filmmaker and you see that, oh, there's an executive producer on another film that was shot here in Utah, I want to reach out to them, but you've never met them and they've never met you. That would be cold outreach. So how do you approach that, Garrett?
Well, I'm going to give 2 different scenarios. One, I get that a lot. I get people that are pitching me that don't know me, that either send me a text randomly or an email. And so as far as that, I don't know them, they don't know me scenario, that exists honestly for about 5 minutes until I've read their email and then I consider them a contact or they consider me a contact. They're reaching out at some point to make that introduction. It still falls within that cold call category. And I think one of the things that works is just an invitation to talk, either if I'm on the receiving end of that or if that's my approach. So I'll get a lot of people that will reach out and say, hey, I have an idea, or there's a very nice introduction, either via text or email, and say, I'm so-and-so. I would love to chat with you. If you have 30 minutes, I could take you to lunch or meet you over Zoom. And that's usually an effective way to get a meeting. And I've again been on the receiving end of that and also been on the asking end of that. Just last week, and I know I'm going long here, but just last week, Darren, I reached out to an organization. I have an idea for a film. I'm very, very excited about it. And so I wanted to find an organization that, as you say, that places a high value on the type of content that this film deals with. And so I reached out to this organization, gave a brief introduction. My name's Garrett. I'm a local filmmaker. I've been a fan of what you all put out recently, and I'd love to talk with your organization about a project I'm working on to see if you'd be interested in being involved. And within a week, I had the CEO, CFO, and one of their marketing people in my living room, and I was giving them an hour-long presentation. We'll talk about how that went, because now that I think goes into this warm introduction, but it works.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And I can't wait to hear more about how that pitch went. But I do think that we've all experienced being on the receiving end of this, right? I get 5 emails a day from agencies that want to help me with LinkedIn, that want to help me with lead generation, that want to help me with AI, that want to help me with all these things. And they're copy paste. They're not personal at all. And I look at the email, and if it's like Darren Smith 9156384, I know that it's a throwaway email address at Gmail. Like, that's not a real email address. That's basically them using, anyway, I don't want to get into the weeds on email protocols and stuff, but like, I know that it's not a real person who really cares. So those get deleted before I even read them. I do not let them into my inbox. However, on the flip side, when somebody reaches out, best case scenario, cold outreach wise, when they reply to an email that I sent out, like a new blog post or there's a new episode of our podcast, and they reply, it means they're already subscribed to something that I'm spending time on, which I value, that people are giving me their time and attention. So, point number one. Point number two, when they start with, hey, I watched your episode on this, or I read your blog post on this, or I read your book, instantly I'm going to give them the time and the attention that they deserve, because they've already said, I've given you my time and attention. Can I have a little bit of yours? And that feels like a fair trade. So I'll read their email, and if it's valuable to me, then I will reply. So to me, that is the key for cold outreach. It needs to be about the other person, not about you. So in my early days, I would say, hey, I'm doing this, and I would like to know if you would like to give me money, right? It was all about me, I. And I got way better at cold outreach when it started to become about them. So I would reach out to someone like Joe Polizzi, who I did a podcast with. And I said, hey, Joe, I know you've been spending a lot of time thinking about this because I listened to this podcast and read your recent post. I have an idea that I'd love to pitch you about how you can get this outcome, which was how to test this out on your podcast. And that intro email led to a pitch call, which led to me and him doing a season of a podcast called The 10K Creator, which did 50,000 downloads in its first season for a brand new show. So when you make it about them and what they want, you have to already know that, which takes time and effort and attention. Like, you have to put forth some effort to learn what they're working on and what they care about. But when you do that and write a 2 or 3 sentence at most email, hey, I see you're working on this. I've got something I think might be beneficial to help you get this outcome it seems like you're working on. Wow, cool. Yeah, let's have a 5, 10, 30-minute chat. And that tends to work out a lot better than, will you give me money for my project?
I think that there are 100% agree with you and what you're saying. And we've all, the reason that we're able to say this now is because we've learned from maybe doing it wrong for so many years, or at least for those first projects that didn't ever happen. I'm Garrett Batty, and I'm really want to, whatever the ask is, making it about me. I think another element is just be patient with it. Even on a cold call, be patient. I'll get an email. I'll get lots of emails that say, hi, I'm so-and-so, and here's 5 scripts for you to consider. And I just want to say, to read a script is going to take a couple of hours, to even consider that. I don't know this individual. I don't know anything about them. And they've just kind of like vomited everything that they've been working on for so long in front of me. And I don't want to clean up the mess. It's just delete. And so just be patient. And again, I think making it about the other person, there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah. Another thought, because I do think this is probably the most common of all these 3 pitches. This is the one you're going to do the most. You might be at an event, or like AFM was last week or 2 weeks ago, and a lot of people that we know went down there to go and cold pitch. A lot of people, is to get curious and to realize that, like, if you just spend a few minutes asking about them, if they're nice, if they're a normal human being, they will ultimately turn around and ask you the same question. And if they don't, they're probably not the kind of person you want to work with. Because if you go in curious, you say, well, tell me about your business, and what are you guys looking for, and what are you working on right now? And you listen intently and you ask questions, and it's not about you at all. You're not formulating, how can I interject my thing into this? You got to go in being 100% okay with only talking about them for 5, 10, 15 minutes, and then walking away and not talking about you. because they're going to remember that you were someone who wasn't transactional in the first conversation. But if you can get curious, then ultimately that table will turn and they'll get curious about you. And that's where you can kind of give your 1 minute pitch or less of like, oh, I'm working on a project that's kind of this meets this. I'm thinking about shooting it in Utah and I'm thinking about this, right? It's a very condensed, nice, tightly packaged version of your full pitch. And if they like that, log line version, then you can go to the synopsis. And if they like the synopsis, they can go to the full script, right? It's like dating. You bring them along slowly instead of proposing on the first date.
So for that cold call, then it should be essentially 90% about them and 10% about you. Like you is the introduction. Hi, I'm Garrett. I'm a local filmmaker and I'm working on a project. Boom. I'd love to talk with you, but find out more what you're working on. Would you take a meeting? Right. And in that
Yeah.
initial conversation, it is all about them. And I think that percentage is going to flip the more we get into warm and invited.
I would also just interject there and go, actually, I think you need to put them first in that cold message instead of, hi,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
so
yeah.
and so and I do this. Hey, Garrett, man, I just saw your movie and it was awesome. And I would love to know what you're doing next. Oh, by the way, I'm Darren. I'm a producer. I just moved here to Utah and I'm trying to connect with people in the industry, but you're top of my list because, man, you killed that movie. Well, okay. I have context as to whether or not I want to talk to this person, but he wants to learn about me. It's not about me giving him what he wants.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep, that's a good point. The order is important.
Yeah.
I
So
love
I
it.
also
Okay,
want to
so
kind of give people a visual really quick. If you're thinking of like a funnel, and I hate the idea of funnels, but let's go with me here. You have a funnel. At the top of the funnel is like your cold outreach stuff, meaning you might cold outreach 100 people and get one to respond, right? The odds are low that it'll turn into the exact thing that you want, like an investor giving you $1 million in your movie. So realize that this is a volume game. Cold outreach is not about doing one a week. It's like doing 100 a day. And that's the level that you need to be thinking of in order to get the results that you want. But as you move down to the next level, which is you're getting an introduction from someone, maybe for every 10 introductions, you're getting one really great pitch or you're getting an investor or something like that. So if you can spend more of your time in the middle and the lower parts of the funnel, the introduction or the invited pitch, you're going to have more success per at bat, so to speak.
yeah, that's interesting. And I I would I would want to know then why you are cold calling that particular individual, right? That's exhausting, I think, to make 100 cold calls, and maybe the product that you're selling is something different. Maybe if you're trying to get your script out there, but again, I I think even cold calls should be identified. Like, who am I talking to? Why am I spending my time and effort reaching out to this individual?
Yeah. My short answer on this is if you are earlier in your career, you're going to need to do more cold calling because you don't have the network yet that can do an introduction, or you haven't done enough projects to where people are then inviting you to come and pitch. And so to me, I'm not doing a lot of cold calling. Like I'm working on the next projects right now. I'm not doing a lot of cold calling. I'm going to a lot of events that my friends are hosting and that are people that I already know. So I can go in and be like, hey, Travis, can you introduce me to so and so? And they do. And then it's an introduction pitch and not a cold pitch where I'm going up to them after they were on the main stage and going, hi, Travis, my name's Darren and I'm a producer and I would love to talk to you. That's the wrong time. But if my friend says, hey, do you know Darren? And they go, no, I don't think so. Tell me about you. It's like, oh, hey, well, I'm a film producer and I'm working on this. 10-second pitch.
Yeah,
And they go, oh, that's cool. Great. We can start a conversation. And they go, oh, cool. And then they look around. It's like, I'm not going to pursue this right now. Right. So it's about context and it's about where you're at. But I think the further along in your career you get, I mean, you and I are both 15 plus years in our careers now. Like we've done it. You've done 8 or something movies. I've done 4. Like we're at a different place than someone who's starting out. So that is part of the equation here, part of the context. Okay. Introduction pitch. How do we do this?
this warm introduction. What does that mean? Like, let's start with identify what that means.
Yeah. So let's say you and I are at a film festival, which we've been at many, or a film premiere even. And someone that I have been talking to would like to talk to you. So they come to me and they go, hey, I've been really curious about how to get to Garrett. What's the best way? And I can go, well, I can just introduce you right now. So I'll come over. This has happened multiple times where I come over, hey, Garrett, I want you to meet so-and-so. And I pull you over and I go, Garrett, this is Dylan and his daughter, right? Or this is so-and-so. And I go, I would
Yeah.
love for you guys to be able to talk about this. So I might set it up or tee it up a little bit. But now I've made it easy for you, like, to engage in the conversation. Because if I'm pulling you over, you trust me and you know I'm not going to throw you to the wolves, right? So it's going to be a valuable conversation. I'm only going to do this if I think it's mutually beneficial. And then
Yep.
I've set them up as like, hey, they're working on this thing and they would love to talk to you about it, right? So you kind of have some
Yeah.
context. They have a little tee up or a little alley oop if we're keeping with the sports metaphors. Then it's a really easy conversation to get into rather than them coming up to you, waiting in line behind 5 other people and going, oh, hi, my name's so-and-so. And now they have to explain their context or where they're coming from. And you're going, oh, another person I got to engage with, right? So an
Yeah.
introduction is where someone you know is introducing you to someone you're trying to get in touch with.
I think in that scenario, and I would even categorize like the business card at a screening, which is, like we've watched a screening or whatever, and we're talking afterwards. I'm a distributor. I'm so and so. Here's my card. Let's talk about this. I think in that scenario, it's a 50-50 like ratio between here's what I'm working on and tell me about what your need is.
I like
Right.
that.
So, meeting Dylan at a producer's get together a couple of months ago, you know, thank you, Darren, for the introduction. So, Dylan, tell me what are you working on, or what brings you here to this event, even?
Yeah.
And I'm just going to find out what he wants to know, what excites him about film, or what topics he's interested in. And in the same, I'm listening, but I'm also thinking, how can I tailor my pitch or my conversation to meet his needs or his interests? Oh, he's got a daughter that's interested in film. Oh, great. Hey, we talk about a podcast. Or, oh, he wants to have an event at his house. Oh, I love presenting at homes, or whatever it is. So a 50-50, but how can my needs meet his interests?
100%. I love the way you're framing that, where it's 90-10 and now it's 50-50. That's a really cool way of looking at it. And to go back, I'm going to mix so many metaphors today. This is going to be the pitching/mixing metaphors episode. But if you go back to the dating analogy, you might be thinking about who at this event can be your wingman, right? So I went to an event this morning where this happened. The person that was presenting, that was like hosting the event, is a friend of mine. And he invited me to the event, but the person that was a guest, like a featured guest speaker, was someone that I've been trying to get in touch with. And I'm like, I really need a good intro for this. So me and my friend were sitting down, just in the chairs after the event wrapped up. And I was chatting with him about what he's working on. We were catching up a little bit because it's been a few months. And then I noticed that the guest speaker, was kind of wrapping up with the line of people that wanted to talk to him. He was coming over to the host and to say bye. And so I was like, hey, can you just give me, I think I may have even said an alley oop. Like I probably said like, hey, can you just say, hey, do you know Darren? Right. That's all I need from my friend. Hey, do you know Darren? And the speaker remembered me. We've known each other for probably a decade because of online. We've crossed paths and, friends, mutual friends. But he's like, hey, how's it going? I haven't seen you in a long time. So great. Ice broken. And I had already planned. So now we're kind of talking about what do you do in that scenario? I already had a pitch ready to go. And guess what my pitch was? It was not about film, right? So I'd done my research about this guest, and I knew that he had a podcast where he features CEOs of like tech companies and venture capital firms and stuff like that. So this dude's super connected, and I was like, man, I'd love to just be in this guy's network, right? I'd love to be in his Rolodex, so to speak. And so what I led with was, hey, how would you like a way out of the box guest for a CEO guest for your podcast? And he goes, interesting. Tell me more. And I'm like, great.
I'm listening. Yeah.
Hook. I got him a little bit. So I tell him about how, as a film producer, I'm kind of like a CEO of a small startup that raises $1 million, has to hire 150 people in a month, and has 6 months to produce and perfect a film that's ready for market while simultaneously coming up with the marketing and distribution plan. And if you're going to do it sustainably as a career, you kind of have to do that 2 or 3 times a year. And he goes, this is so cool. I've never thought of it that way, but I love movies. Like, definitely, we're going to have this conversation. I was like, great. I'd love to. Let me get your number and we'll figure out a time, because I'm here in Provo. I know your studio's upstairs. Let's chat. So it was about him. I know you need a guest for your podcast, because that's the thing that every podcast that does guest interviews needs, is more guests that are interesting and different than any other podcast out there. So I already had that kind of canned, ready to go. And then guess what happened next? He says, well, tell me more about what you're working on. Great. Now I can go into my other prepared pitch that's a little 1 or 2 minute thing about, well, look, I've produced 4 movies over the last 3 years, and this is some of the stuff that I noticed along the way. So now I'm thinking about this, and this is what I'm setting myself up for the next few years. And it's really fun because yada, 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 yada. And I do the pitch. And then again, he goes, okay, we need to do lunch. Call me, and we're going to go and chat about this because I want to help you with that. Like, 10 out of 10 could not have gone better. That's why I'm like riding high today. But that's the power of an intro pitch. Instead of me going up and standing in line with the other 5 or 6 people that wanted to talk to him and bend his ear about something, he came over to where we were. My friend with status introduced me as someone else with status, and we were able to have a conversation peer to peer instead of having that, it's false, but it's real. Like, the status difference, the gap between he's the speaker and I'm an attendee, because of the intro, that got flattened out. And now we're both friends of my friend and we're on equal ground.
Yeah. That's very cool, Darren. I mean, that's a success story right there, as far as that warm introduction. Here's how to pitch. Here's what to deliver in that scenario. My story, my experience with that one this week was, a couple of weeks ago, we did a screening in Memphis for The Carpenter, one of these red carpet premieres. There were a number of different people there. One of our media people, Michelle Moore, was there, and she introduced me to a producer out there, a distributor out there who's based in Memphis. We didn't have a lot of time to chat, but it was her introduction. Like, this is Garrett, and he was, you guys should talk. And there always is that mutual, like, there's got to be some sort of mutual connection or mutual interest. We didn't have a lot of time to talk there, but and I didn't just like offload everything on him. Oh, I'm so excited to talk to you. I want to, can you do my movie? Whatever. Here's 3 ideas. You just try to play it cool. Oh, great. You have a card, and I'm going to go give my Q&A right now. In this scenario, I was the speaker. Like, it was my night, so to speak. And he was there observing. So he was already learning a lot about me and what I do. But I followed up with him, a week after the screening. I reached out via email and said, hey, I got your card. Thanks again for taking the time to come out and watch that movie. And we didn't get a chance to talk. Would you be interested in taking a meeting? And we met. So here this week, I had a Zoom call with this essentially distributor that I didn't know much about. And so on our call, I mean, I tried to do a little bit of research, but on our call, I said, forgive my ignorance. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what, what you do in the industry? And I'd love to get to know that. Turns out, he says, and this guy has been around, and he says, yeah, well, I got started, in the industry kind of on the music side, and then shifted over to film and got involved with a little film called The Passion of the Christ, and was responsible for basically putting that into theaters for Mel. And I'm like, my mind is blown. And I'm like, I'm so sorry for my ignorance. Please, like, tell me more. But it was a nice 50-50 conversation where I was just listening. He knows that the reason for me reaching out is to make a connection and to probably pitch and work together or talk about ideas. But there was this, we spoke for an hour, and it was back and forth. Him talking about his experience and projects that he's interested in, that he likes, and then me also talking about other things that I'm working on and the things that he had seen and so forth. And we will continue to engage and hopefully get to that point where it's an invited pitch.
Yeah, amazing. So I think the same principle here applies, where even though it's 50-50, you want to lead with, tell me about what you're doing, or
Yeah.
Let's talk about you first is the context here, right? Let's make this about you first, and let's buoy you up and give you some compliments. Oh, I read your book and it was amazing, and I remember this principle and I applied it and this happened. Like whatever it is, make it about them first, and then let them reciprocate and make it about you, and that's okay too. And then take the chance when it's given you. Like that is the subtext of what's happening. We're going, oh, okay, I just talked for a minute. I should ask him a question. And then they do. And then I'm not going to talk for 10 minutes and give a 10 or 20-minute pitch right then. I'm going to talk for a minute or two. And you can kind of feel, because it's a back and forth 50-50 conversation, if it's getting imbalanced. If I'm taking 3 minutes to his one, that's not good balance. So instead, I should be like, but I'm getting long winded. So tell me more about your podcast. Like, how is it going? You've had it for 2 years, and it's okay then if they go, no. Tell me more about that because that sounds really cool. Great. They have said, I want to shift this to be more of a 60-40 or a 70-30 because what you're talking about is more interesting right now for me. And that's fine, but you can't lead with that. You have to go in thinking 50-50. Fun. Okay. I'm wondering if there's anything else we should say about the invited pitch. I do think if you have a business partner or if you're going to an event, like I know a lot of people went down to AFM, think about who you know and think about who they know. And then use that scenario to kind of be each other's wingman. Hey, Garrett, I want to introduce you to this guy. And the way that you say that, the way you tee up an introduction matters a lot, right? Michelle Moore is a great wing woman, because she goes, oh, you two need to talk. And when you say it like that, instead of you two need to talk, that's a very different phrase than, oh, you two need to talk. This is exciting. And there's some magic that's going to happen. That's what you're saying with your tone of voice. So you can actually practice that too, where as a wingman or a wingwoman, you can be like, I'm going to get really good at introducing people to other people because there's a ton of value in being the connector.
100%. And I think that in and of itself, like that act of connecting somebody to another person, really kind of, I don't want to say validates, but it's a good position to be in. And I think a great place to do that is film festivals. I've had that experience where I'm talking with distributors. I know that distributors are there looking for content, and to be able to pull another filmmaker in and say, hey, I know we've just spoken. I want you to meet this person, and their film is incredible. And, hey, so-and-so, this is a distributor that I've worked with before, and I can't wait for you guys to talk. You need to talk, as you phrase it.
Yeah.
It's, for me, that's saying, look, I'm not threatened by this individual. I don't feel like I'm going to lose face or lower status or whatever. It's just we are there working together to help each other. And I kind of prescribe to this law of abundance. I say, look, there's abundance out there, and we can all partake of that. We can all share that. And helping somebody else is not going to slow my progress.
Yeah. I want to spend maybe another minute on that idea of the high status, low status. It's something that's made up, but is very real. And it's extremely hard when you're a passionate young filmmaker to go to film festivals or conventions or events, networking events, and feel like you're the low status person there. And so we reinforce that by telling ourselves, well, I haven't done anything yet. Well, I'm brand new. Well, I don't have any experience. Well, I don't have any connections. And if you come into an event like that or a scenario like that, and you believe you're a low status person, that everyone can kind of feel that. And it's hard to say, but I want to bring this up because it's a real thing that happens every time that you go to one of these events. So how do you solve that if you are young and new and you haven't done any projects yet? Well, you go in with a mindset of contribution. How can I help? And sometimes it may just be that you're connecting people, right? Early on, I remember going, oh, there's my business partner was a director. And part of what I needed to do was pitch him as well as the projects we were working on. And so as I met other producers, then I would be the connector, even though I hadn't done a movie yet. I could say, hey, producer that I met at AFM, you should really meet Alan because he's a talented director. And what that did was instantly put myself as a peer of the other two that I'm connecting, right? Because I'm saying, oh, high status person, producer, I want to introduce you to somebody, which means I'm at your level and I'm able to do that. And so if you go in with this mindset of contribution and being willing to help with whatever other people need, you raise your status in your own mind and in their minds. And I think that's how you approach it, because it's a real thing. There's no avoiding it, but you make it worse if you believe that you're low status.
I think you're right on, Darren. That's a very good comment, very good thought. One thing that pops into my mind also on warm introduction is to not miss your chance. Like, you do need to sense when you are being invited to pitch, and not necessarily invited, but when it is your turn to step up. So, oh, Garrett, that's awesome. Tell me about what you're working on. You can easily downplay that. Oh, we're just staying busy. Like, wait. No, T, that's your time to pitch.
Yes.
Tell me what you're working on. Oh, I've got 3 projects, and whichever one fits whatever they've been talking or whatever their interests are, that's what you want to talk about. There was a guy, an investor. He invested in one of my projects a few films ago, and I know him from church, and he would always come up and say, "Hey, how's it going? What are you working on?" And I have a rule never to take pitch projects to people at church, which is a hard, fast rule, and one I strongly recommend. Or any, like, family or church or friends. Let's just keep business in business. But he would always ask me to come up, and it was a courtesy. Hey, what's keeping you busy? What are you working on? And finally he got very specific. He said, so tell me about how does finance work, or how does the money work on that? It's like, oh, well, if once you're tired of throwing away money elsewhere, then you invest in film. And I kind of, again, downplayed it, but then it triggered, like, oh, he's genuinely asking me. And I said, hey, well, I I typically don't talk about this type of you know investment opportunities at church, but if you want to do lunch, if you are sincere, I'd be happy to take you to lunch and talk about the business side of things with you. And that's exactly what he was asking for. And it just took me a long time to kind of figure out, oh no, he was setting me up. He was trying to invite me to pitch. I just needed to pick up on that.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue into our third and final pitch scenario,
Like, it was great time.
which is an invited pitch. This is when you have done something to get the awareness of someone who's maybe interested in learning about your next thing, and they invite you to pitch them. They're saying, let's set up a time and a place to have a conversation about your next opportunity. So that might be a pitch meeting at a network, which you and I have both kind of had over the last few weeks, which you can talk about. It might be a lunch from an interested party where they say, I want to learn more about this specific opportunity. Let's hop on a Zoom call. Let's go to lunch. Let's do an hour pitch at your house. That is a scheduled, invited scenario. And I would probably put the ratio here at like 80-20. And it's probably
Yeah.
like the first 5-10 minutes is 50-50, and then it quickly transitions to like 80-20. When they say, all right, tell me about your thing. Great. Now you're in pitch mode and you have a little bit more time. I'm of the mind of keep it as short as possible still. I like the synopsis version rather than the screenplay version. There's a great book that's a resource that I recommend to everybody called The 3-Minute Rule by Brant Pinvidic. And this is a guy who sold The Biggest Loser and 300 other TV shows and became like the master pitcher in Hollywood for TV, reality TV shows. It's a great book.
Nice.
3-minute rule means don't pitch for longer than 3 minutes. And it's really hard to get a nice tight pitch in 3 minutes. It takes a lot of work. But if you do that work, and maybe I can just quickly share my experience that I had at a network. A mutual friend of ours invited me. I ran into him at lunch one day and he came up and he said, you need to come pitch me. I said, okay, like I'm happy to. He knew that the 2 movies we'd just done, he'd come to our premiere. He said, come pitch me. I want to know what ideas you have. So we scheduled a time with his assistant. And last week we had a pitch. So I went in with an outline of a 3-minute pitch. And when he said, all right, tell me about what you got, I went through 3-minute pitch number 1, and then we talked about it. So that's where the 80-20 comes in. It was like 100% me for 3 minutes, but then the next 20 minutes was back and forth, him asking me, well, what about this? And tell me more about this idea. And what about this? And what he's doing in that scenario is, what do you like to work with? Are you high on ego? Are you going to be a terror to work with as a producer? Or is this a collaboration? And are we going to work together? Is it going to be fun? Are we jamming? So kind of feeling the room out that way, but keep your pitch short and then leave plenty of time for Q&A, because that's really where I think you sell people the idea can always change. But if you suck in the room to talk to in 20 minutes, they're not going to want to start a financial relationship with you funding a project of yours.
I've been on that side of things, Darren, where I was invited to pitch. This was an invited pitch. I was so excited, the meeting and everything. And it was very early on in my career. And I wanted them to know that I knew this show in and out. This was a series that I was pitching to a network. And I had probably a 27-page, keynote that I was going to get through. And there was plenty of text and graphics and fonts and lots of stuff and information and budgets and locations and everything. And I probably got to page 7 in my pitch. They were very, very patient with me, looking at the table, and they're kind of looking at their phones or looking at each other and kind of rolling their eyes and thinking, oh man, I gotta double down. I'm not selling this very well. And finally, after page 8, they're like, okay, time out. We don't and they just fully interrupted the pitch, thankfully. And I wasn't by myself. I was with a partner, and we knew we had just kind of messed up, and that opportunity was lost. And so your advice is spot on. Like, hey, give us 3 minutes, tell us what we want to know real quick, and then let's talk. Let's just ask questions and stuff like that. You're not don't fill a full hour with one idea.
No, definitely not. If you have 30 minutes, it's 5 minutes of getting to know you and some repartee and how's the weather out there and where are you calling from and getting to know you a little bit. And then it's 5 minutes of pitching or less. And then it's 20 minutes of Q&A and let's jam. For me, that has been ubiquitous. Every time I've had a good pitch meeting, it's followed that kind of structure, because you don't want to hop on a call and be like, hey, how's it going? So let me dive into this, right? That's too abrupt.
Yeah.
You need a few minutes to ease into it. They may have come off a stressful call, or may have just got out of the car and they rushed in. They need a minute. Feel them out. Just be like, hey, you winded? What's up? Did you come back from the gym? Make a joke, build some rapport. It's okay. And just show your personality. Don't be someone you're not. Don't turn on pitch mode and be like, hi, so my name's Darren and we're going to talk about film. That's not good either, because then when that person doesn't show up the next time, they're going to be like, oh, you were just putting on a show for me. That's not great. You can turn up your personality 10%, but don't become someone else. And then have a really solid pitch where you download the big idea in 3 to 5 minutes, where they go, oh, I get it. I know what this is. And now that I know what it is, I have questions. And if they have questions, that means they're interested, which means you can keep talking.
I think there's value. 2 things come to mind. I think there's value in, then once that is done, once that meeting is over, make sure you have a leave behind, a pass out. Make sure that they have some sort of physical element that they're going to take back to their office. It's going to sit on their desk for a couple of weeks. It's always going to kind of be there. They're going to move it from one pile to the next, and it's always there. But when you follow up, in your email, hey, or just thanks again for letting me come pitch, wanted to follow up, or whatever it is, it's right there, and they know it. The other thing is that you are taking that time in an invited pitch to get a sense of who you might be working with, and make sure that that's a mutually agreeable relationship. I've been in, and that the expectations are there. I've been to an invited pitch and gone in and presented, done the 3-minute thing and started talking. And, this was for an independent film, and it was kind of a faith-based movie, and one that I felt very passionate about. And they started talking about okay, well, let's talk about numbers. How do we do, Napoleon Dynamite did 45 million at the box office. And at that point, I'm done. I don't want to say, if that's their expectation, you say, look, you want lightning in a bottle, I can't provide that for you. And it's very much casual, cordially saying, okay, they this individual or this organization doesn't know enough about film for me to make a film and manage their expectation and so forth. We all want that, great. But to go in with a pitch saying that that's going to happen, that's not an individual or an organization that you'd want to really be selling.
Yeah.
So take a chance to kind of feel them, to sense if they are a good organization to work with.
100%. You should be doing that. That's where the 80-20 plays in, right? If it's 100% you and 0% them, that's like presenting at a keynote, right? Where you're no interaction with the audience. You're just presenting 100% of the time, then you walk off stage. That's fine, but it's not a great pitch because
It's going to lead to a lot of cold calls.
yeah, exactly. So one other thing, I'm actually curious. I want to double click, so to speak, on this idea of a leave behind, because you could spend a ton of time creating visuals, creating a sizzle reel, writing a script, whatever it is. And I have progressively over my career become less likely to do the full thing up front and just start with the minimum viable pitch. Meaning sometimes that's a log line. Not sold, but I brought on an executive producer onto a project from a log line. I said, hey, I've got a movie about this thing that happened, this true story. And it's kind of this movie meets this movie. And she said, who else have you told about this? I said, nobody. You're the first one. She said, great. Don't tell anyone else about this. I want it. I was like, off a log line, right? So if you do enough work on the smallest minimum viable thing, you can get to the next stage, which is being paid for development to write the script, right? So there's, again, early in your career, you're not going to get those opportunities. So you need to write the full script, and that's fine. But I went in with some bullet point outlines on my laptop that I was reading from my laptop to this friend of ours that I was pitching. And that was fine. I didn't need to have visuals. I didn't need to have the show Bible. I didn't need to have four seasons mapped out. I didn't need any of that stuff because it's just, let's talk about the idea and see if this is even something that makes sense at this network. Oddly enough, the other thing I pitched, I had even less of an outline. I had an idea, which was kind of like an expanded logline version. And I said, here's the show in a nutshell. It's this, and this is what happens in an episode. And he goes, wow, that's super cool. I don't think it fits our mandate, but if you want to pitch that at NBC, I have connections there and I'm happy to pass along a pitch deck. Well, I don't have a pitch deck, but guess what? I'm working on a pitch deck because if I can get a pitch deck in front of NBC and they're interested in it, that's cool. Why wouldn't I take that opportunity, right? So
Yeah.
I'm kind of not anti-leave behinds. I'm anti spending tons of time and money. Like I wouldn't want to spend 10 or 50 grand on a short sizzle going into a pitch meeting. Like that's money out of pocket that I don't think increases my chance of getting the show made.
Sure.
What do you think though?
No, I think you're 100%. I think the leave behind is the one sheet or some sort of write up or here's my card. I just got somebody engaged me to develop a feature, and I on their first, they said, hey, we're just going to mail you whatever the initial payment, and the only thing in the envelope was the payment and a card, a little business card. I'm like, oh, well, I'm curious. This is interesting, So I'm looking at that card, but it's something physical, tangible, leave behind that keeps it's on my desk now, and it reminds me to keep their project front of mind.
Yeah, I should have left a business
Darren,
I didn't.
you what's that? Oh, you
I should have left
but
a
you didn't.
business card. I didn't do that.
You did say something, and I think it's a perfect way to kind of wrap up this episode. You talked about whether it leading to what, like what is the purpose of a pitch, and I think that that's an important thing. Whether it's a cold call, the warm introduction, or the invited pitch, to have in your mind what the call to action is. What's the takeaway? What are we hoping to accomplish? Cold call, I am hoping to accomplish a meeting. Like the warm introduction, I'm hoping to get to a pitch point, right? And ultimately, in a pitch, we're hoping for development money or an action to be taken so that we can move a project into the next phase.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think that should be clear at the end. If it gets to that point where you're like, hey, this feels right, we're both on the same page, what is the next step? Go, okay, there's my ideas. Hope to hear from you. So what is the next step? So I'm going to be working on this project for a week. I can't put a lot of time into it until there's development funds. If it's something you're interested in, let's follow up in a week.
Yeah. I think it's different for every scenario because as part of your pitch, you need to know what the ask is. And so whether it's a social pitch, whether it's the introduction pitch, whether it's the cold pitch, like it doesn't matter which one, but you need to know what is the one question that you want a yes to, right? And so part of the pitch is, man, I'd love to get lunch with this person, or I'd love to come on their podcast. Like that's what happened this morning. So for me, if I could get on his podcast, then we're going to have a long conversation that's kind of lacking any sort of charge to it. There's no ask from me. It's just, I'm coming on your show and we're going to have a cool conversation. And with that extra context, then I could be like, hey, if you want to grab lunch and talk more about this, but he actually skipped that and said, we need to grab lunch. Right. So that was the ultimate goal, is like me sitting down with him in a really like neutral environment and saying, let's talk about what each other are working on, how we can help each other. That's awesome, because I know he's connected to lots of people that I want to be connected to. The same thing with the scheduled pitch, the invited pitch over at the network. Like, yeah, the next step is, yes, we want to move forward with this. That doesn't necessarily mean we want to give you a 10 episode season order. It may be, we want to develop this with you. We want to pay you to do a pitch, a more developed
A deck. Yeah.
characters and
Fill the deck. Yep.
storyline and the themes and all this kind of stuff. Like, okay. So that's kind of what I was looking for from that one. And that's what we got. We got an invitation to send over a write-up, and they're going to pass it around, and they're interested in kind of moving to the next step, but that hasn't happened yet. So we're waiting. We're in limbo. So the last thing I'll say too is, don't just pitch one person and then don't pitch anyone else. Like, you can't put all your eggs in one basket. Like we were talking about, maybe you have to do 100 cold outreaches to get one response. And maybe you need to get 10 introductions or 10 initial conversations in order to get one scheduled or invited pitch. And maybe you're going to need to do 2 pitches to get one deal, or one yes, or one next step. That's probably pretty high. It's probably more like 5 to 10 of those to get one yes. So you have to be kind of zooming out and going, yes, you're a creative person and you want to be doing art all the time. But if you want to have a business that supports your art full time, you have to understand the numbers that are at play here. And it's a bit of a numbers game. And if you're just doing cold calling, it's a volume game. If you're doing invited pitches, you're spending more time, you're spending more effort, and you're going to try to do as many of those as it takes to get your project moving forward.
Much good information here, Darren. I'm learning a lot hearing what you're saying, and I'm remembering mistakes I've made, and I cannot wait to continue to pitch, ideally to get a project moved into the next phase, which is like paid development.
Yeah. Well, and it's not because I'm smart. It's because I also made those mistakes and learned from them. So we've both gone through all of these things, cringy things and successful things, all of them together. Well, I really hope that's helpful. And if you liked this episode, please share it with people. Share it with your business partners, your collaborators, your mom. I don't care, but like, share it around, because people need to understand how this stuff works. And I think it's super valuable that we've put these 3 in one episode.
Yes, and send us your questions or your experiences. What are your horror stories of pitching? What mistakes have you made, or success stories? Those are probably more fun. Say, hey, I pitched an idea in an elevator and got a gig out of it. So we'd love to hear those. Go to our website and share your comments.
Yeah, 3coinpro.com/podcast. Go,
There
go,
it is.
go. Awesome, man. I think that's a good one. Good to see you.
Hey, looking forward to chatting next week. Thanks, Darren. Good luck.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Truly Independent. To join us on the journey, be notified, and ask us questions about today's episode, head over to 3coinpro.com/podcast and put in your name and an email address. If you're a fan of the show, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast app and be sure to share this. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Our intro and outro music is Election Time by Kjartan Abel.